It's good. I was left back in Baltimore.
Good.
How long were you away? You were almost a full year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I moved back to my mom's like the second week of March, and I moved back here like Valentine's Day, so 11 months.
Wow, it's hard to tell if this was. The time has just morphed in a variety of ways this last year.
Yeah, it last year just feels like it didn't exist.
Yeah. And then now in the middle of all the sports, it's just been crazy because I insist on playing all of them. But hey, it's a good time.
I play most. And then MMA day today, so it's payday.
Oh.
I lost last week. I lost one.
All right, here we go. Awesemo is the NBA DFS strategy show today. We have just wall-to-wall sports. As Adam was mentioning, we've got MMA, we've got NASCAR today, and tomorrow we also have NHL. We've got CG, what is it? See it? Counter-Strike Global Offensive. I never remember the exact acronym. The LOL, League of Legends. I'm playing all of this stuff, Adam, using the Awesemo tools. Makes that all possible for me. It's a great time saver, and it's effective. I like
playing League of Legends.
League of Legends, of course. It's the European Masters series right now. I just plug and play little fantasy cruncher optimization. Put in I don't think anybody else is doing projections besides us for this. So I've been cashing nicely. I've been tripling up every day of the series. So
yeah, it was one of my best quarantine sports. I just stopped when other sports came back, and I didn't have to wake up at 5 a.m. anymore.
Yeah, I just look at it this way. Same thing I do with NHL. I plug and play, and I figure if there are line changes, you know what? That's me spreading out my lineups. It's being contrarian. I don't worry about it because our tools are good enough that you definitely put yourself in a position to win once you kind of have a system down and figure out what you're doing, and that's something very helpful. And you, my friend, I understand, have become quite the MMA expert. Now, is this all math? Is this tools? Or are you watching these matches, I guess?
I mean, I watch. It has nothing to do with my playing. Expert's not the right word. It's more blind squirrel finding nuts. But yeah, MMA has gone well just using, using the tools, using projections, using the fighter tool. I think MMA it's an interesting sport strategy-wise because it's to some extent zero sum. So like if a popular fighter loses, you know who did well. So like from a strategy standpoint, it's interesting. And I think people still make mistakes in tournaments. So it's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. But we got a nice little promo going on there with the old UFC 261 taking place tonight. That is actually the promo code. It's UFC 261. We've got Usman versus, is it Jorge Masvidal? Is that
next weekend, right?
Yeah, that one is coming up on the 24th, but right now 50% off. You sign up today for that weekly pass. Oh, it's even 30 days. You get the full month here for $14.95. Definitely want to check that out tonight. For those of you on a bargain budget, we do have the top fighters tool available, but you're going to want to jump in for these upcoming pay-per-views here. A couple good fights coming up, but especially multiple title fights on that UFC 261, which is occurring next Saturday. Definitely a nice card tonight as well, but you'll want to check that out to get in on all the fun. And that does give you access to the Slack channel or all the Slack channels that we have here at Awesemo, which is very helpful as well. The other thing I want to point out is we do have the ability for you to get some more free content here if you utilize the Awesemo avatar, place top 3 in any tournament with at least 5,000 entries, and send a screenshot to Awesemo on Twitter. We'll get you 30 free days of Awesemo premium content. That's nearly a $100 value. Check out, you can download the Awesemo avatar, and there's little instructions as well on the homepage of Awesemo. You can check that out. Go over to the awesemo.com/announcement/avatar, and it has all of the details there, or just ask us on Twitter. We'll help you out. Adam, we've got half a dozen games here today. I guess we're really only going to focus on the final 5. They start at 8:00. We're going to kind of skip that Utah and Lakers game. Just at a high level, there are some showdown contests for that. Sounds like Donovan Mitchell is going to be out. He's dealing with a sore or an ankle injury. Anthony Davis still not ready to return, but he's closer than LeBron. They expect to have both of them back by the end of the month, hopefully start rounding them into shape. That, of course, means, more minutes there in the meantime for Andre Drummond and Kyle Kuzma. Dennis Schroeder was ruled in, and had a dud of a game in his last ones, but he's in the mix as well. Mike Conley, unlikely to play for this being a back-to-back here. So that means, and I think Jordan Clarkson might still be out as well, but that means thinner.
Pretty sure Clarkson's back.
Oh, is he back? Okay. Well, bonus for him as one of the last remaining guards. And then, of course, Joe Ingles, number 7 all-time on the Utah assist.
Clarkson was available yesterday for whatever that's worth.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's talk about today. First matchup here, we've got Cleveland at Chicago. Tomas Satoransky was out in the last game. He's dealing with a non-COVID related illness. We don't know what his status will be for tonight. We know that, and I'm assuming it's non-COVID related because he's not in the health and safety protocol like teammate Zach LaVine is. And then on the other side, Cleveland will be without Damian Dotson and Dylan Windler. Those guys haven't played in like a month, so that really doesn't matter here. Some back-to-backs today with 22 teams in action yesterday, Adam. What do you like here? Take us through Cleveland. Take us through the disaster of the rotation that is Cleveland. A little sex land backcourt, a little love in the forecast tonight, Adam.
Yeah, I mean it's just a healthy team right now, which makes things difficult. Looking at their last game against Golden State on Thursday, you got another 35 minutes from Garland. Sexton came back, played 34 minutes. Like, those guys are going to get a lot of run, but when both are playing, they lose a little bit of production. Kevin Love takes some usage as well. The pricing doesn't look particularly favorable on those guys. Jared Allen, kind of the same boat, should lose some rebounding numbers with Kevin Love playing more minutes. It's a pretty ugly team in general. I think, Kevin Love still offers a little bit of upside. He played only 22 minutes against Golden State, but that was the second half of a back-to-back. Maybe, he should, I would assume, get back to his 26, 27 minutes that he normally gets. At 6,500, I think he's okay, but there's not a whole lot that really stands out here from Cleveland now that they're essentially fully healthy.
That is kind of the downside, but with just 10 teams in our player pool, no stone unturned as we head through the NBA strategy show here. On the Chicago side, we saw a nice game last night from their recent acquisition, Nikolai Vucevic, who put up I think it was like 24 and 12, somewhere around there. I didn't see the final box score, but he was solid. We got a spot start there from Kobe White, who definitely was in that 40 fantasy point range as he's filled in for Tomas Satoransky. Sadly, I ended up with a lot of Denzel Valentine, and that was marginal at best. He only played about 17 minutes, despite missing a lot of players, dealing a bunch of guys as well. Still a relatively full Chicago roster here. How do you want to approach this one? It feels like Vooch is going to be a lock for 20 field goal attempts and a 20 and 10 tonight. Is he a cornerstone play for you?
He looks really good. And, with it being a 5-game slate, it's going to be easier to get to him than it was last night. You don't have Jokic on the slate. You don't have Embiid on the slate. So I think Vooch, Vooch does look good. He was second on the team yesterday in potential assists without LaVine. He had 7. I expect him to, kind of go back to his Orlando numbers. He's so far this year averaged about 1.5 fantasy points per minute without LaVine, or since joining the Bulls, I should say, 1.4 when LaVine's on the floor. So I do think Vooch looks good. And then the Satoransky news is, of course, really big because Kobe White started in his place, played 34 minutes yesterday, and he was really productive. You don't necessarily expect White to always be that productive, but he did have 15 potential assists. He did look really, really good, and he is still really inexpensive. So if you take Satoransky out, combine that with LaVine being out, White is about a 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy without LaVine on the floor. If you're getting 33 or 34 minutes, that's clearly a very good value. If Satoransky's back, it becomes a lot riskier because, as you were saying, even though Chicago is shorthanded here, they're still running very deep rotations. They played 10 players yesterday. In the previous game, they had played 11 guys, at least like 4 minutes in non-garbage time. So they're just playing enough bodies where things can get pretty messy if you bring Satoransky back. I think White would still have upside, but I think he'd be a lot riskier because you're not really locked into those 30 plus minutes like you are if Satoransky's out.
Yeah, last night they only had 3 players above 30 minutes. White with 33, Vooch with 33, Patrick Williams there with 30, and then just a ton of other players in the teens to low 20s. So nothing overly appealing here, a little bit of mix and match, but gosh, even guys that you would think that they would, want to take a look at, like Troy Brown Jr., former Washington Wizard, Lauri Markkanen, who's wrapping up his contract, etc. They're not getting the minutes. And then who is it? Devon Dotson and Cristiano Felicio got minutes last night because, hey, why not here? So the rotation, as Adam mentioned, is running pretty deep, not overly exciting, but a couple quality plays on top. Everything's going to hinge on that Tomas Satoransky news. Let's look here at
one other thing to mention is Daniel Tice. Okay. He only played about 20 minutes last night, but he's been averaging 23 or 24 minutes since joining the Bulls. He started alongside Vooch last night. They've been playing him alongside him. So I think that's someone, they started him over Thaddeus Young. I think Tice is still too cheap. He didn't really come through last night, but I think that more often than not, you're probably getting mid-20s in minutes from him, and he's still only 4K on DraftKings. So I think Tice looks pretty good.
All right. We got a bunch of stuff coming on today still. After us at noon, we've got the MLB Strategy Show breaking down everything that's going to be with T. McBee and myself. 2 o'clock, we have the NASCAR Show with Jason Floyd and Phil B. 3 o'clock, NHL with Slim Cliffy and Josh Harris. You're doing it right when you get a Canadian on the show. So Slim Cliffy will take us through the Frozen game there. We've got 3 o'clock behind the paywall, the game plan with Terry McBride, T. McBee. So that's an interesting thing that we have here at Awesemo. 5 days or 6 days a week. Sunday, everybody gets a day of rest, but we do a premium show with a screen share. And you can ask questions directly via Slack or the YouTube channel, but it's behind the paywall here. And people break down their strategies, show you how to use the optimizers, how to approach things. Saw a fun one today, earlier this week with Steve Buzzard, the Colts, multiple millionaire winner here in DFS, was looking at him at how to approach the weather games for MLB, and he was breaking down what the 150 maxers were doing from, I forget if it was Sunday slate or Monday slate, but how they were approaching that that angle of going for it, avoiding the games entirely, or isolating, what I like to do, isolating the games into just a stack. And then if it doesn't come to fruition, you just say, my guy's got no hit, move on. Can't get mad about baseball with 200 more days of action coming up. But it was interesting. There is no definitive right answer, at least on that one slate. And people, it was basically all what their risk tolerance was. But you could see that the 150 maxers definitely had an approach to what they were doing. They just didn't all have the same approach. Baseball, many ways to win here, but that's something that's very helpful. You can get some one-on-one coaching and save you a lot of time just learning how to use the different tools here. So definitely check that out if you are an Awesemo member. All right, Adam, our next game. Boy, that was a fun one last night with the Wizards. We had Zion Williamson foul out. We had overtime. We had Russell Westbrook, just phenomenal. I got to ask you, as a fellow Washington, you're a lifetime Washington fan. I moved out to the area and I adopted them since there's no more Seattle Supersonics here. Do you miss John Wall? I kind of like this Russell Westbrook thing going on here, at least from a fantasy perspective. It's fun as hell.
Yeah, I mean, I miss Wall. I'm a big John Wall fan, but I do really enjoy just watching Russell Westbrook play. I mean, you can say what you want about him as far as, impacting wins and all that in the NBA, but the guy's fun to watch. So I definitely do enjoy it. And then I've never been a huge Russell Westbrook fan prior to him coming to Washington. Just it kind of like, I think earlier in his career, he was like overhyped. Everyone thought he was like, one of the best players in the league. And so it was kind of just like, I was never really a big fan. And then now I think it's really overstated. Like people think he's actually bad just because he's not, Kevin Durant. So it's easier for me to like him now that it seems like the pendulum's kind of swung and people think he's bad. And now he's on the Wizards, which is nice too. So I've really, really enjoyed watching him this year.
Yeah. He's played 40 45, 46 games now for the Wizards, and he is the all-time career leader in triple doubles. So yay for that. He actually has triple doubles in half of his games. He's averaging that on the season as well. He's done that before, but he is also closing in on the all-time record by Oscar Robertson. He's I think he's within 20 now. So that's something that could come to fruition as well. Not this season, but definitely next season, as long as he remains healthy. The hidden gem here, and I want to start off with this because I've heard you talk about him. I've watched him play. You've mentioned it countless times. Daniel Gafford, the announcers last night were just going nuts about him because they were saying he's the spark plug, he's the energy guy, and it certainly seemed that way. What the heck went wrong in Chicago that now we're seeing him and Wendell Carter Jr., who's getting steady minutes with the Magic, having I don't know that breakout is the right word, resurgent. They're popping up on the radar. Is Gafford going to come into the starting lineup? And I kind of like him off the bench because less DFS gamers are going to be on it.
Yeah, I said on the show yesterday that Daniel Gafford would win someone a tournament soon, but it probably wouldn't be last night just because of the way the slate shook out. And then he goes for like 18 points, 9 rebounds. I think he had 4 or 5 blocks or something. But the big thing is that he played, including overtime, he played 26 minutes. But even though it was overtime, getting those 26 minutes is nice because he had been on, somewhat of a minutes restriction coming back from what looked like a really nasty ankle injury. So I think that's really good to see. And I think he's a great fit with this team. I think he's a great fit with Westbrook. He brings rim protection that the Wizards don't have. He brings a rim runner to play with Westbrook that the Wizards don't have. So I just think it's a great fit. Like, I think he's probably playing above his head also, but still, I think it is a really, really good fit for him. He's someone that picks up blocks, he can rebound. And I just think playing with Westbrook is going to boost his fantasy appeal. So definitely someone to pay attention to going forward. He's only 3,500 again today. There's no guarantee that he plays more than 15 or 16 minutes again, but it seems, at least, Scott Brooks has been very inconsistent with his center rotations, but he's kind of just been looking for someone to take over that spot since Thomas Bryant went down, and Daniel Gafford's consistently brought it on both ends. So I think it's a matter of time before he starts getting more run.
Yeah, and you guys can check out all of the NBA projections today. That's among our free content. So that is definitely worth looking at. We also have the MLB top pitchers tool, which is similar to our the top stacks tool, which started it all. But that's what Alex Baker, Awesemo, has created here, is sort of a one-stop shop there of looking at how the pitchers will be, what their likelihood of being a top 2 pitcher on the 2 pitcher sites or a top 1 pitcher on the 1 pitcher sites. Very, very helpful. You can see where the popularity is coming in, and then you can look to leverage off of these guys because baseball a very variant sport, but that is something that is worthwhile. We also have free NHL projections today, and then the top fighters tool, as I mentioned earlier, is free for MMA. If you want to jump in for 30 days of Awesemo MMA content, you can get that with UFC 261 as the promo code, because that's the big fight coming up next weekend. Adam, not to bury the lead, but I wanted to talk about Gafford because that was such a fun development having him on the squad. So we've got Washington hosting Detroit back-to-back for both these teams, 228.5 implied total. Washington favored by 4 or 5 points, depending on which book you are looking at. Detroit, I don't even... They're tanking, they're resting guys, they're not resting guys. It's an absolute disaster. I think it's unlikely that Killian Hayes plays tonight, and then everybody else is basically questionable. Who knows what they're going to do? Kind of hard to analyze them. Anybody who's starting for them, this is a phenomenal spot going against the Wizards. We're going to have interest in them. Hard to tell what we want to do now. Sadiq Bey, the one guy that I think stands out in particular. He had a slow start last night, but ended up finishing relatively strong from a fantasy perspective. So that was good to see. On the Washington side, Davis Bertans was out last night, attending to a personal matter. We're not sure of his status tonight as well. But as we let's look to the rest of Washington first here. Obviously, we hit on Westbrook and Gafford. You got Bradley Beal. You got a little Rui Hachimura. Anything else you like here from the Wizards? And then take us on to the try to read the tea leaves there for Detroit for us.
Yeah, so I mean, just to elaborate on Westbrook, clearly a top play on the slate once again. The guy's averaging a triple-double per game. He's still not that expensive. Like he's expensive, more so than other players on the slate, but it's not like we're getting an 11.5 or a 12K price tag or something like that on Westbrook. And the guy's he's top 3 in minutes over the last month in the NBA. He's averaging like 1.6 DraftKings points per minute since the All-Star break in the games he's played with Beal. So just keep plugging Westbrook in. Beal, keep an eye on his status just because he has been, dealing with an injury recently. He played 42 minutes, including overtime last night. If he were to sit, Westbrook clearly just becomes the top play on the slate, even more so than he already is. But if Beal's in, I think you can assume he's going to play his normal minutes. He's played at least 36 minutes in regulation in 3 straight games now, and he's still pretty cheap. He's 8,700 on DraftKings. He's 8,300 on Fanduel. Even if you account for the fact that he's struggled a bit since the All-Star break, dealing with his hip injury and all of that, he's still priced for those struggles. So he looks like a good value as well. After that, it's tough to get to much. With it being a 5-game slate, value potentially could be kind of hard to come by, in which case you could look to like an Ish Smith at 3,400 who has basically more or less replaced Howell Neto off the bench. But even last night, only like 15 minutes for Smith. So the playing time's been kind of inconsistent there. Definitely not someone I'd be really considering unless just nothing opens up.
Yeah, and that's sort of where it was. And the announcers last night were talking a lot about that Neto he's been having a nice year for Washington, but clearly he's definitely behind Ish Smith when he is healthy.
Yeah. I mean, he played 21 minutes last night, but he played 3 the night before. So the point being, it's just kind of it's Scott Brooks doing what Scott Brooks does. More often than not, you're going to get more minutes for Ish Smith, I think.
All right. The Magic 8 Balls has a little more clarity when it comes to the Wizards rotation than Mr. Brooks. Detroit, the mess. Plumlee probably going to play tonight, I think. That's a nice matchup for him going against the Wizards, who are one of the worst rebounding teams in the league. Who knows what's happening with Jeremy Grant, per se. Sadiq Bey, as I mentioned, kind of the one guy I'm looking at. You've got Hamidou Diallo, who's dealing with an injury. He was ruled in, and then ruled out last night. I guess he is a true game time decision at this point. Does anything stand out for you? We have a cast of thousands with their guards, but I expect as players start to get ruled out for rest, because they're having such a taxing season resting already. What is there anything to keep an eye on here for Detroit well in advance of tip-off?
Yeah, so there's definitely going to be good plays from Detroit. It's just a matter of who they are, and it's really tough to say right now because we have no idea what the injury report's going to look like. Detroit's been an absolute mess in terms of both the rotation and who plays and who doesn't. They had Plumlee listed out yesterday for rest, so I'm assuming he plays today. Grant was listed out for injury management, so I'm assuming he plays today. If either of those guys play, they look pretty good. Jeremy Grant coming in at only 6,500 on DraftKings. He played 35 or so minutes in his last game, I believe. And he's someone that, regularly is playing well north of 30. Plumlee, you have sharing time with Isaiah Stewart, but he's only 4,900 on DraftKings, which looks like a very good value if you're going to get 25, 26 minutes out of him. He's another one of these centers that he's a good passer. He scores enough and he can rebound. He should have plenty of success here against the Wizards. You mentioned Sadiq Bey. I agree with that. He's kind of been like the one guy where everything aligns for him to get a lot of minutes when he's healthy because he's one of their first round picks that they're looking to develop. There's nobody ahead of him blocking him. Like with Isaiah Stewart, they'd like to develop him, but they also haven't fully committed to Mason Plumlee just sitting out the rest of the year. So there's only so much they can do. With Sadiq Bey, there's nobody ahead of him. So he's getting the minutes pretty much regardless. He's not a great fantasy producer, but he's not bad either. And he's still pretty cheap. So he's someone that, as far as Pistons go, you can feel relatively good about. And then the rest of it's kind of going to depend. You had Corey Joseph out yesterday. He's been playing big minutes. He struggled 2 games ago, played 23 minutes. But prior to that, he'd been averaging well over a fantasy point per minute with Detroit. Josh Jackson benefits if Joseph is out. Saban Lee would benefit if Hayes and Joseph are out. It all just becomes a mess beyond like it assuming Grant, Plumlee, and Bey play, they all look good. The rest just kind of becomes like who is starting and basically who is starting.
Do you remember as a kid, did you ever read those choose your own adventure books?
Yeah.
That's what this feels like with the Pistons. It's like, okay, if you want to do this, go to page 123. Right. If you want to do that, go to page 114. That we'll have more clarity. We have 2 hours leading up to lock. It's an 8:00 tip off tonight. So we'll know more with the Pistons, but definitely with the matchup against the Wizards, it's one you want to get. I see someone asking in chat there. Ray Ferris says, hey, can we play Beal and Westbrook in the same lineup? Absolutely. There's no question about that. Westbrook, I think, is now Beal is second or third in the league in usage behind Doncic And Westbrook, I think, is 7th or 8th overall when I looked last week among anybody with at least 1,500 minutes. So those guys do literally everything the Wizards.
Yeah, there's a couple reasons I think it's okay. One, the slate size, being only 5 games, lack of other pay up options, but also that Westbrook and Beal, but especially Beal, are underpriced, and they contribute, like you were saying, such a large percentage of Washington's offense. Like this game, Washington's not a good enough team that they're especially likely to blow out an opponent because they don't play defense. So it's just really, really possible that Westbrook and Beal both have big games. Detroit still hangs in it enough, and Detroit's production can be spread out enough that I wouldn't even say like you have to play X, Y, or Z guy with Westbrook and Beal. If you're using Fantasy Cruncher and you want to bump the projections for guys on Detroit, if you have both of Westbrook and Beal, I think that makes sense. But it basically, if Westbrook were 11.9 and Beal were 9,900, I'd have a problem with it. But at their current salaries, it's just really easy to get 45, 50 points from Beal and 60 plus from Westbrook.
All right, as we head on to our next game, let's talk for a moment about our sponsor, No House Advantage. They're putting a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering player prop contests across the NBA, MLB, and PGA for cash prizes. This is an exclusive peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform. What does that mean? It means we're playing against other players. We're not playing against the house, hence No House Advantage. Why does the house matter? Well, this is all built on player props here. And that's something that, as more and more states do some legalized wagering, which is nice. We now have it here in Virginia. That's something where you're going against the house. The house sets the line. And by the way, the house almost always wins. On No House Advantage, they set the line for the night before, and then you're going against other players to determine what is the likelihood of the outcome. So generally, you are going to choose from among 200 to 500 different player props there. You choose over or under, and then you select the confidence points that you have in each one from 10 all the way down to 1. And then if you are correct, you get those points score you points, and that's how we determine the winner of the contest. So it's the same formats we're used to: GPPs, head-to-heads, 50s, etc., going against other gamers. No House Advantage. If you sign up now, and you can sign up for free, but if you sign up and use the promo code Awesemo when you make your first deposit, they will match you up to $20 in site currency, and that'll come out of your account first as you start to join these contests. So definitely worth checking out. And the best part of all, we've got free projections for them every single day. I'm going to drop that into Slack here. Or into the YouTube chat. So what we do here is we say, here's what you should do with the overs and unders. And not only that, we then go make another 500 lineups for you in different combinations that you can just pick from and put into these contests. Now, there's some game theory involved here, of course, because what feels like obvious plays is where you can gain some leverage if you think you have a bit of an edge. And with the Awesemo projections, which are, of course, a byproduct of the of Alex Baker's models and other contributors here, definitely worth checking out. But we got you covered for free. There's nothing better than that. And they're going to give you $20 to sign up on their site. Check it out. That's No House Advantage. They have a mobile app that is available in most app stores. All righty. We've got the Golden State Warriors going into Boston here. We've got Eric Pascal is out. Big whoop. He's played twice in the last month. Sadly, rookie James Wiseman tore his meniscus, so he is out for the rest of the season. And then Kelly Oubre dealing with the wrist injury that has held him out of the last 4. He's questionable. I don't have a lean one way or another on this one. The surprising thing for me, Adam, Golden State is only 4.5-point underdogs going into Boston. What the hell's going on with the Celtics this year?
Oh, I mean, Golden State's also been extremely good when Oubre's been out, so there's that working in their favor as well. But yeah, the Celtics also struggling.
I don't see that. So if you're looking for a little wager, maybe taking a little. I like the in-game wagering, Adam. It's fun. You have cash out options on these different websites, and it makes the game that much more intriguing. When's Maryland getting the sports betting? I think they're voting on it recently.
It passed in October. They're just setting up logistics and stuff now.
Gotcha. Yeah, it took almost a year for it to get in here on Virginia. But I will tell you this: every sports book is like just they can't give you enough money to come try out their sites. So if you go over to oddshopper.com, that's an Awesemo sister site, and if you click on any of those sportsbook links, it automatically gives you the best referral offer that is available at any of the sports books. Be careful. My wife, she watches every morning. She's like, bet $1 to win 100 on the Draftkings app. Make it rain. She knows all of these ads. She's like, God, they're every ad now for the news in the morning is one of the 5 major sports books. But signing up through us gives us a little cookie on the back end, gives you guys the best deal out there. So check that out over at oddshopper.com. But back to this one here, reining myself in. Let's start off on the Boston side here. Golden State, not exactly the best defense, but an amazingly efficient offense keeps them always in the games. Do you like maybe some Tatum here, a little Kemba, perhaps some Jaylen Brown? We got Marcus Smart back. What do you want to do here? No Robert Williams. That is the one person who's out, and Evan Fournier is in the health and safety protocol. So, Fournier, we hardly knew you as a Celtic, but that's really not going to disrupt their current rotation that we're used to seeing. What do you like here from the Celtics?
Yeah, I mean, I think the starting point's Tristan Thompson with Robert Williams out right now, projected to get the most ownership on DraftKings. And I think it makes sense just because it's a slate that right now we don't have a ton of value available. And Thompson played about 25 minutes through 3 quarters against the Lakers, didn't play at all in the fourth, but that game kind of had gotten out of hand. It had gotten out of hand, and then the Lakers went on like a 17, or the Celtics. The Lakers went on a 19-point run. So it ended up closer than it was. Don't know if Thompson would have gotten fourth quarter run or not, but most of the Celtic starters didn't really play much in the fourth. So I think there's the potential that you get like 28 or so minutes from Tristan Thompson here, and he's cheap. So I think he looks like a very good value. Beyond that, it's always tough to prioritize any of the Celtics main guys when they're all healthy, because you get like 1.13 fantasy points per minute from Brown. You get around 1.2 from Tatum. You get around 1 from Kemba. And they're all more or less priced for that. But they still end up being good plays in the context of just like filling out your lineup. Because like I know the other day on the shorter slate with Jaylen Brown, he didn't really stand out at his $8,100 salary. But once you started building lineups, because he had shooting guard, small forward eligibility, he just fit into a lot of lineups really well. You'll find that to be the case because these are guys that are very good players. They give you a high ceiling. Their median projection might not be a glaring value, but once you put the glaring values into your lineup, a lot of times you end up in a position where you need to fill it out with the most raw points you can. And that's where guys like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown come into play. So I think they're good plays. Golden State's one of the fastest teams in the league. It's just that it's difficult to pinpoint one and say like Jaylen Brown's a great play or Jason Tatum's a great play. It's more whichever one of these guys fits the best into your lineup. They're all good plays.
All right. That is making sense. I'm just looking here at the standings. Boston right now tied with Atlanta for 4th overall in the Eastern Conference. It's kind of a scrum down there for the what is likely going to be the final play-in spot with the Raptors, Bulls, and Wizards all kind of tied there. Looks like the Pacers sort of have a leg up on them. They're 4 games ahead of those other 3 teams. So Boston somehow in the mix to host a first-round playoff series if they can pull out of their tailspin here. Somehow the New York Knicks are just half a game behind and 3 games above 500. That's an accomplishment there for the Knickerbockers. For Golden State here, how are you feeling about Draymond Green? We know that he does tend to perform a different function when, or at least a more involved function when James Wiseman is out from a rebounding perspective. Not exactly the eye-popping numbers, but he's averaging about 8 points, 8 assists, 8 rebounds, double-double, almost always in play, and a triple-double, though it's only come to fruition a couple times this season. Definitely in the mix if things are happening there for Draymond. Is he in the non-Curry category, the first player you're looking to from the Dubs?
Yeah, I think so. Just because, the salary's gotten a little bit more expensive than you're really comfortable with, but he's played 16 games now without Weissman this year. He's averaged 1.16 DraftKings points per minute. In those games, he's averaged 7.5 points, 8.3 rebounds, 10.1 assists per game. But the other thing is that he's averaged 1.4 blocks per game compared to only 0.4 blocks per game when he's played with Weissman. So you're getting more blocks, you're getting more rebounding. the assists are there as long as Steph Curry plays, and he's not a high usage guy, but that's kind of the last thing that you need from Draymond. So, and he's also averaging 33.5 minutes per game in those games. So I still think Draymond looks pretty good. A little bit less margin for error now that his salary on both DraftKings and Fanduel is up above 7K, but still a pretty nice piece to round out some lineups given the increased ceiling we see without James Wiseman.
And then kind of Wiggins. What's your leverage point on Wiggins? If Oubre's in, how much does that decrease your interest in these other tertiary options here?
As far as Wiggins goes, it doesn't matter to me too much. The only reason it matters at all is they've just been better without Oubre. But if you look at like Wiggins' usage with and without Oubre in games he's played, you don't see a drastic change there. So it's more like Wiggins is who he is. He's going to be a 23% usage guy. He's not going to contribute much in the way of peripherals. He's going to play around 34 minutes. If he's hitting his shots, he's going to be a great play. If he's not hitting his shots, he's going to be an awful play. And there's no real way to know which one of those it's going to be. So players like that in general, it kind of just comes down to ownership. Wiggins last slate, the ownership was relatively low for a 4-game slate or whatever it was. He ended up having a good game, being someone that I was getting to in tournaments. If the ownership's higher today, you can back off just because he's going to basically just come down to whether or not his shot is falling. Where I do think Oubre has a pretty big impact is my interest level in Steph Curry, because of course, like with or without Oubre, Curry can get his. But in the 5 games he's played without Oubre so far, you have a 37% usage rate for Steph Curry, and the offense as a whole has just been so much more efficient. So I think it's just everything just looks better. Everything's going better, and you're getting more usage from Curry. So it's difficult to prioritize Curry over Russell Westbrook, where they're similarly priced. There's like a $600 difference on DraftKings, but I think the gap is at least narrowed if Oubre is out.
All right. And I know, so this is kind of the DFS strategy show. So I want to mention, we've referred to usage a few times. And just a reminder, basically what that measures for a player is the play ends with them. It can be a shot attempt, it can be a turnover, et cetera, but it's sort of like, what was the result of the possession? And the more that where the ball is, you're the final person on the possession, then you have one of the outcomes happening. So that's kind of the way we look at it. A 37% for Steph Curry would be leading the league if he did that for the entire year. The current leaders generally are between 32 and 35%, and that's like Beal, Doncic, Jokic is up there, Joel Embiid is up there. So this makes a lot of sense for those guys, but it's kind of a measurement. Now, the other way to look at it is if everybody had equal usage, that would be 20%. So a lot of times we'll look at some of these players where I'm just going to pick somebody random, Tim Hardaway Jr. I know his usage is right around 20%. Why is that? Well, he doesn't do much besides shoot. So that's sort of where he is. So you want to look at that and see what's happening. Also, when you have certain teams where someone is dominating the usage, that means the plays are not ending with some of the other players. And in those cases, you want to either A, try to find somebody who's got assists, B, look for somebody that's got more rebounding. Hi, this looks like Draymond Green to us. So even though he doesn't have a high usage rate, he is contributing in other categories that can happen along with the usage. So it's just a kind of a metric out there. And I know this is late in the season, but sometimes we throw around some terms that not everybody knows how to utilize.
Yeah, I think, and just kind of from a general like practicality standpoint for DFS, it's one of the quickest ways just to like gauge someone's ceiling, someone's upside. Yeah, because of their involvement. Like one example that I talk about a lot is John Wall, who he's not a particularly efficient player. And so if most players had John Wall's usage, they would score more fantasy points than John Wall does. But it still shows you like at his price point that he has a little bit higher ceiling than a lot of guys, because there's going to be games where he produces at an above average rate, and within his team's offense, he just plays a massive role. So it's one spot where like, when you're actually projecting someone, you have to take into account their efficiency and all of that. But just looking at usage, you can kind of get a gauge for, when someone shoots better than normal, how good can they be?
Yeah, exactly. And then that's sort of the what spawns the rest of projection. So in addition to when we're looking at a player's minutes, we want to kind of see what is their involvement, and then additionally, when someone is injured or they're in a different matchup, et cetera, you start to look and say, okay, this player combination is likely to be more utilized in this matchup. What happens when those guys are on this court together? Does that increase or decrease whatever their general baseline is? And then you can start, boosting assist rates or decreasing rebounding rates, et cetera. And that's, a little underneath the hood of how projections kind of work. But Adam crawls through these box scores every day. We look at a lot of game flow box scores here. You can get them on several sites. One of the free sites is popcornmachine.net. I like Add More Funds myself because they also have the NBA Wowie. You can do the with or without WOWY, with or without you. I never knew that's what Wowie stood for until last year. I think I've been using it.
No, I didn't know until right now.
There you go. So I had no clue. I mentioned that on a show when I was with Fast Eddie, who he and I have done shows together for half a dozen years here, and I was like, I never knew what that meant. And he's like, yeah, it took me 2 years before I figured it out as well. And he goes, one day I just said, heard the U2 song With or Without You, and he's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So anyway, those are sites that are very helpful. So a game flow box scores is another fun little nugget. You can see when somebody played. So Adam will talk a lot about who is in the closing unit, and that's very important because what happens in the fourth quarter can make or break you from a fantasy perspective. If your team is leading, or it's a quote blowout, what's going to happen? Who's going to get the mop up duty, etc. But if the game is close, you want to have as many players that are likely to be playing in that particular situation, and it's not always the starters in today's NBA. A lot of times they'll be the centers won't play, like a Jared Allen or someone like that, or I'm sorry, not Jared Allen. I'm blanking on his name. The Phoenix center. Why am I?
DeAndre Ayton.
Thank you, Ayton. Alan Ayton. I love the dyslexic memory here. But those guys may or may not play depending on the matchup, right? So that's where you want to see who's in the closing lineup. But by looking at these game flow box scores, you can see who subbed in for whom. You can see people that have, oh my God, they have direct backups. They're splitting just the 48 minutes of regulation, et cetera. It's very, very helpful. And that's something that Adam and Josh and Spags and those guys crawl through all the time to get a good feel for what's going to happen in different scenarios, which is incredibly useful when we get this late breaking news that can upset the apple cart quite a bit here. So just another little nugget there. Anything else you want to mention here for this game?
Yeah, a couple other things from Golden State. Kevon Looney's been starting in Weissman's absence. For the season, he's only averaged 17.9 minutes per game as a starter. But in each of his recent starts, he's either played or been on track to play 27, 28 minutes. He's averaged 0.89 DraftKings points per minute in his starts this year. So he is still a decent value option, especially if other stuff doesn't open up. And then if Oubre is out, you should once again get Bazemore in the starting lineup. He dealt with a little bit of foul trouble last game. You're typically going to get around 30 minutes from him. He's at a price point where pretty much where he should be. There's still a little bit of upside, but there's some downside as well. Also, if Oubre's out, though, you did get about 30 minutes last game from Juan Toscano-Anderson. That was in part because he played really, really well. But it is nice to know, and it's been the case all season long, that Steve Kerr will go with a hot hand approach. And if someone's playing well, he'll get more minutes. Even his normal rotation, you're normally getting 23 or 24 minutes for Toscano-Anderson. So he'd be a decent value regardless, kind of, as long as Oubre is out, but he does have the upside to play a bunch more minutes.
All right. Jim Parrish says, hey, this Memphis and Milwaukee game looks pretty juicy. We'll talk about that in just a second. I want to remind you guys that all of our shows, with the exception of Live Before Lock, are put out on the Awesemo Podcast Network. That's very helpful if you're out running errands or working out or on your commute and don't want to burn through data. You can download the shows and listen to them at your convenience. The other nice thing about this, listen close, if you leave a 5-star review on any of our podcasts, you will be put into a drawing for 1 year. You will be eligible in the drawing, and each week we are giving away one Awesemo weekly pass. So if you leave a 5-star review, which we hope you do, put your Awesemo username in there or your Twitter handle, and you will be eligible for a drawing for the next year for each review you leave to win an Awesemo weekly pass. I want to point out at this time, there's only a couple hundred names in the drawing. Like, 200 or so. So you have a pretty good chance of winning if you do this. So jump on in there, give us a 5-star review, and enjoy your opportunity to win a free pass. We are available on all of the podcast sites that you're used to. Google Play, iTunes, Spreaker, Podbean, just to name a few, but definitely check those out and enjoy. All right, Adam, Memphis, we have 8.5-point underdogs as they head into Milwaukee. 236.5 over under here. Brandon Clark was out last night dealing with a hip injury. Justice Winslow and DeAnthony Melton are dealing with various leg maladies. They've each been out for a fair amount of time. They're questionable, though I do not expect them to play. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Brandon Clark. He was ruled out late or closer to tip-off last night. We'll see from there. On the Memphis side, no Dante DiVincenzo dealing with the sore toe. Are there any rest candidates tonight here for Milwaukee? We've actually seen Giannis dealing with an actual various bumps and bruises and sitting quite a few games. Is this a spot where he may be ruled out later in the day?
I mean, they didn't play yesterday, so I assume that we're fine there. It wouldn't be the first time that the Bucks have ever ruled guys out, but yeah, I'm assuming that we're good. They play. Yeah, they don't play tomorrow either, so I assume we're fine. DiVincenzo being the only guy on the injury report. You had Bryn Forbes start in his place last game. Forbes played about 22 minutes. Jeff Teague played 26.5 minutes off the bench. I don't have any level of confidence in either one of those guys, but one of them probably plays like 26 minutes if you're someone playing 150 lineups that really wants to roster a mediocre backup from the Bucks. But, obviously the starting point here is Giannis. He only played 25 minutes in that game against Atlanta, didn't close the game. I don't really know what to make of that. I mean, it could have been by design because we know he'd been dealing with injuries. It just seems weird to me that they brought him back if he was going to be limited. It seems like it would have made more sense to just let him take another day off. But regardless, I don't really know what to do with that information going into today unless we get word that he's going to be limited. I kind of think you have to just expect 32, 33 minutes out of him again, which is going to make him look like a good option here. Memphis is a solid team defensively, but they do play at a fast pace. You should see a lot of possessions in this game, and Giannis is one of the best fantasy point per minute guys in the league. So I still think I would put him probably behind Westbrook just because you're most likely getting a few more minutes from Westbrook at similar point per minute production, but definitely one of the top plays here. You can look to Holiday, you can look to Middleton in tournaments, but they're both expensive enough because they've played a good amount of games recently where Milwaukee's been shorthanded, so their salaries have come up. It's tough to prioritize either one of them as long as Giannis is playing. 7,800 small forward for Middleton on Fanduel looks decent, but again, it's kind of just a secondary option for me there. And then beyond that, it's tough to get to a whole lot from Milwaukee. I don't really trust Pat Connaughton's minutes. I don't really trust Bobby Portis's minutes. Brooke Lopez is cheap on Fanduel, but not the most exciting player, more of like a last guy in type guy for me.
All right. That, this as interesting of a game this is, and both teams play relatively fast. So the interesting thing about this one is who is it going to be? And without additional information or anybody sitting, it's kind of hard. So this to me feels like a mix and match group for our player pool here. I don't think anybody's bad play, but the question then becomes, well, where's the upside here for it? If we look at the Grizzlies, they on the season, I think only Ja Morant is averaging more than 30 minutes per game. And I think he's like 31 and a half or 32. Brooks is up there like at 29 and a half. I looked at this last week, so I'm just going by memory, but rarely does anybody crack 30 minutes in a game for them outside of Joval and Morant. And they generally don't top 32. It's just this incredibly, it's rec league ball. Everybody gets to play. And it can be a little bit frustrating, especially when they're all at full health, because nobody really on the bench stands out with a ton of minutes as well, especially as they're working in some of their youngsters here. So this is kind of a frustrating team to look at. I do like Joval in this particular matchup. He's someone I think that gets overlooked a lot of the time by the DFS gamers. And we really like to look at players that have that double upside, gives us a nice floor. And with all of the shots in this game, if they are missing, which sometimes is going to happen, if they're missing with greater frequency, then he has a better chance of out rebounding his peers. Anything else from this matchup?
Yeah, so I mean, you never have to convince me on Joe Val. He's just his playing time, like you were saying, is always kind of concerning, but he just produces at a better rate than most players around him. So there's always tournament upside there. John Morant obviously is really talented and relatively inexpensive too. But there's a couple things I want to point out. For one, if Brandon Clark sits, that typically leads to more production for Kyle Anderson. If Brandon Clark is in, he's cheap enough where I think he's worth a look. But where I'm really interested here in tournaments is Grayson Allen and Dylan Brooks. They're both pretty cheap. You're assuming that Melton and Winslow are out, you're probably getting like 26 to 30 minutes from Allen. You're probably getting 28 to 30 from Dylan Brooks. One thing we know about Milwaukee, we know they play fast. We know that they have an efficient defense. We also know that they force a lot of three-point attempts. Over the last month, they've allowed the most three-point attempts per game. If you look at Memphis over that time, 6.6 three-point attempts per game for Grayson Allen, 5.3 for Dylan Brooks. These are the guys that get the most three-point attempts for Memphis. So if Milwaukee does look to get the ball out of John Morant's hands, which you would expect them to, you're getting more looks for Allen. You're getting more looks for Brooks, and they are cheap enough where they're going to help you fill out some lineups. So I think they have a little bit of added upside in this matchup.
All right. R. Stanley in the YouTube chat says EMac is like one big ad. Why? Yes, I am. And that's how these shows maintain free, or we are able to maintain them for free, is because we are promoting different things. Most thing I see in the YouTube chat is, how can I get this? Give me something for free. Well, I've showed you told you about 3 different ways that you can win Awesemo premium content passes. And the bonus of me doing a lot of ads and not having done a show with Adam for about a year is I can see him slowly start his soul slowly start to leave his body. Right. He's right now up and on by the ceiling, looking down on himself, being miserable because he has to listen to me talk, which is like the best gift ever. So there we are. One more game to go here, Adam. I don't really know what to do with this one. We've got the San Antonio Spurs, nearly double-digit underdogs, going into Phoenix. Did I put that in right? 230 over under. That's relatively high. Phoenix, all Chris Paul does is win. I mean, he changed the whole dynamic of Phoenix. They now are playing a fantastic team defense. He's upped their offense. He and Devin Booker are learning to coexist now as we get deeper into the season. We've got the guy whose name I can never remember, DeAndre Ayton, in a bit of a mix here as well. And then from the Spurs side, I don't know. It's not the best matchup for them, so nobody's really standing out for me. How do you want to break down our nightcap here?
Yeah, so it looks like a 227 total right now for this game. 10-point Phoenix favored by 10. Really tough matchup for the Spurs going up against a good Phoenix team. You have decent pricing on particularly DeMar DeRozan and DeJounte Murray, both guys that average well over a fantasy point per minute in the games they've played with each other and without Aldridge this year. They give you a high ceiling. You can also look, Keldon Johnson on FanDuel is only 4,300. Anyone who's rostered Keldon Johnson with any sort of frequency knows how poorly that can turn out, but he is cheap. You should get around 28 minutes for him. It's not a bad value option. And then on DraftKings, you can look to a $3,400 Patty Mills, just because, he's 3,400. He's probably playing around 24 minutes. You're hoping he gets you like 18 to 20 fantasy points. So he's the kind of guy where right now it looks like a decent value. There's a good chance that by the time lock rolls around, he's not even in the conversation anymore. But, kind of just secondary options there. The Phoenix side, a little bit better matchup here, but the pricing, not really great. You're paying a premium for Devin Booker. You're paying a premium for Chris Paul. Both guys have very high ceilings. Booker, because he has a usage rate up over 32%. Paul, because of the assist numbers and because he's an efficient enough scorer. But you're typically getting like 30 to 32 minutes from Paul, which doesn't really stand out that much at his price point. Booker not getting the assist because of Paul. DeAndre Ayton, I think, is okay as well. You're getting around 30 minutes from him. The issue is that Dario Saric is a quality backup, and Saric normally is going to get 17 or 18 minutes, which is going to make it, difficult to get a whole lot more than 30, 31 or so for DeAndre Ayton, but he's priced for that. So there is still some upside there. If value doesn't open up, this is a team that you could look to and kind of just, hope that the game gets out of hand a little bit or that something weird happens. Like Dario Saric is a good point per minute producer. He's not playing enough minutes where he's a very strong fantasy option unless Ayton gets in foul trouble or the game blows out. But if it does, he's cheap enough where he likely gives you a very good score. Cameron Johnson, kind of the same boat. He's inexpensive, played about 22 minutes last game, played about 30 minutes the game before that, only 3,500 on DraftKings. Projects for 17 to 18 fantasy points, not going to get you excited, but doesn't need that much to go his way for him to have a good game. And the same can be said for Cameron Payne. So I think looking to the cheaper guys on Phoenix, if value doesn't open up, I would extend, like Bridges and Crowder into that category even too, just sort of guys to fill out lineups and let you get the players that you actually want more so than anything you feel really confident in from the Phoenix side.
All right, let's have a moment to remember the Keldon Johnson game. That was back on March 19th. He had 58 fantasy points, 9 of 19 shooting, was 21 rebounds, was just an outlier of a game. I mean, for goodness sake, he had 11 offensive boards. It was just an outlier. How do we know this was an outlier? Well, the 3 games prior to that, he had just over 60 fantasy points combined. And the 3 games after that, he had about 70 fantasy points combined. So don't be chasing that one. As Adam says, there's a lot of sub 20 fantasy point nights here for Keldon Johnson.
Yeah, I remember that game because I had wrote like a pretty detailed part of the deep dive on why I thought Keldon Johnson's rebounding numbers wouldn't be as good going forward because of Jakob Poeltl replacing LaMarcus Aldridge, and then he grabbed like 22 rebounds that night.
Yeah, that was definitely a crazy one. All right, as we wind up here, I want to remind everybody that No House Advantage is the sponsor of the show. We have the free projections every day for you for No House Advantage. When you sign up, use the promo code Awesemo. They will match you up to $20 with your first deposit. We've got 2 MLB shows coming on after us, 2 NBA shows after us, plus the MMA Live Before Lock with Jason Floyd and Pete the Heat Rogers, as well as a NASCAR show today. We are all over your schedule. Definitely check us out at awesemo.com. And of course, you're already on the YouTube channel. But if you're listening on the podcast, we can catch everything live on the YouTube as well as Twitch. I want to look at just one thing here for Odd Shopper, which is our sister site. So this has one today. You have the free NBA projections. So the cool thing about our NBA projections is not only do we have the fantasy points for each of the sites, but there's also a page that breaks out everybody's minutes, projected assists, projected rebounds, etc. But you can utilize that as well when you're looking at some of these player props. So looking at DeJounte Murray here, he's someone I always like to look at, and I had to chuckle this morning at Awesemo. So if you go, let me drop this link into the YouTube chat for you. But we have now added on these pages here, you've got the expected ROI as well as the expected win rate. And DeJounte Murray, perfectly even, which made me laugh today, Adam. We have him projected for about 15.1 points. The over and under is 14.5 on some books, and it's 15.5 on other, which is right on either side of that. And there is an expected ROI of about 1% on either side. That means don't bet this one. It's not a good one. It's really not much to find an edge there. But some of the other ones out here, as we look for, say, a player in the early game here like Royce O'Neal, you want to say, oh my God, the over-under of 6.5 points. Oh, he's easily going to get that. No, he's not. He may not even take 6 shots today. 12% expected ROI with the 60% win expectancy of going under 6.5 points. So that's sort of how you can read these different things. Another one that stands out, and everybody likes to bet the overs. The unders are not a bad way to go because there's a lot of things that can go wrong, from in-game injury to cold streaks to benching, etc. But if you look at some of these guys as well, like a Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, 8.5 over under. Well, of course he's going to get 8.5 points. No, not so fast, my friend. 18% chance or 18% ROI and a 2/3 chance he falls below those. That what is a measly total there. So definitely keep an eye on the unders. That's something that sports books, of course, know that the average schmuck out there like me wants to bet the over, because who wants to root for something bad to happen? Unless you're Ben Rossa, generally that's not how it works. But definitely check that out. It's a lot of fun over there, and you can we call it Odd Shopper because you can look at the different odds on the different players. Now in basketball, the odds are going to, or pardon me, the over-unders are going to be relatively similar, but the vigorish, or what you have to pay to place your wagers, is going to vary across the different sites. And just by looking at a glance, you can find better opportunity there. That's coming right to your bottom line there. So the less you have to pay to win, the better off you are. And that's why it's called shopping the odds. So we have this set up for you. That was one of the things we found in our feedback from various surveys that we did that everybody thought would be the most helpful for them as the sports books started opening up in the various states. So just want to point out all of the available tools that we have for you. These are all free. Again, definitely want to check this out. But we're going to get on out of here. Adam, been good doing a show with you. Haven't seen you in forever. Well, I've seen you on shows forever. I haven't had a chance to do one with you, but this was fun. It was like old times.
Yeah, minus the hangover.
I was sad. I was messaging Adam last night saying, please give me hungover Adam in the morning, please. He said, nah, not happening. Not happening. You're being too responsible, Adam, as you head into your 30s.
That's one way to describe me.
or you didn't have any booze in the house. That could be the other thing. But with that, we're going to get on out of here. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hit that like button and subscribe on your way out of here. Much appreciated. Good luck.